Welcome to episode 81 of the XRM Toolcast. In this episode, Scott and I speak with Mike Ochs, better known as Mike Factorial, a fellow MVP about the ALM Accelerator. Now, this is an update episode since we talked about it before, and Mike's been working on it for 2 years now. We talk through what's going on with it, some of the future things that are going to come out with it, how it's working, how they're dog fooding it, and some healthy ALM practices to do as well. So if you're interested in anything ALM related, this is definitely the episode for you. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the XRM Toolcast. With me, your host, Daryl, always raising the bar, and Scott. I love crabs in my kayak, Daryl. Scott, how's it going?
Well, that bears some explanation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Bears everyone. I thought you were going to say Scott raising the crab trap.
Raising the crab trap.
Duro. Yeah. Yes. Well, no, I mean, I do like some crab, but it's been trying to catch crabs recently, and it's more difficult than perhaps I first anticipated. But yes,
your arms aren't long enough.
I will. More that I didn't anticipate them being so angry when I tried to catch them, which you can understand, really. Let's face it.
Wow.
But our guest today, who is a long-standing expert in catching crabs.
Yes.
So that's a good segue, really, isn't it?
It's a good segue. Yes. Mike Factorial, the Microsoft MVP and maker of Microsoft Dynamics 365, Power Platform, ALM Accelerator, and Azure Code. Hashtag ProCode, no code, unite. Just reading off your Twitter profile there, Mike. So if you want to change anything, too late. We already read it off.
That sounds about right. I don't have anything to add.
So this is kind of an update episode, right? Like we've talked about some tools for ALM previously on the show, but you've been working in that space. You've been working on that like solid for like the last 2 years, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah. So we thought you'd be the best person that would be willing to talk to us. Thank you very much, and telling us about what's going on in this space and what has come out recently and maybe what might be in the pipe.
Yeah, I mean, a lot have. So it's been, like I said, it's I think Mark was on in 2020. That was right around the time that I joined the team, the PowerCat team, and I've been primarily focused on the ALM Accelerator that is part of the COE Starter Kit. It's as well as ALM in general in the platform. So I've been on a lot of calls with product team about the developments in Power Platform ALM. It's a huge focus for Microsoft right now. Huge focus, obviously important for customers, and there's a lot going on in the platform to enable ALM, healthy ALM. And we're kind of, with the ALM Accelerator, providing a sort of a stopgap measure, I guess, until all of that stuff lights up in the Power Platform, in the platform itself. Our goal with the ALM Accelerator is to ultimately deprecate it, for it to be gone, and everything is in the platform.
That's always exciting. Hey, we want you to work really hard on this, get to work so we can retire it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's fair though. I mean, I don't want to support it for the rest of my life, so it'll be great when it's a lot of those capabilities in the platform. So just some history on it, right? Like, it's been 2 years since Mark came on and talked about it. At that point in time, we were in sort of like private preview. We were just about to put things up into public preview and have it everything open sourced out on GitHub. The ALM Accelerator is effectively an app that sits on top of Azure DevOps pipelines that handle all of the sort of committing your solution to Git, source code to Git, deploying into downstream environments. The pipelines themselves are not tightly coupled to the app itself. So you can absolutely take those pipelines that we built and use them independent of the app, which something that we've.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's something that we've recently we had a very small coupling in there for a while, and we've taken that out completely. So now those pipelines can run without the app. But the app provides sort of easy button convenience layer on top of the pipelines to do things like committing, deploying, but also configuring deployment settings, which is a hassle to do without the app. Deployment settings are those things like, connection references, hooking up connection references in a downstream environment, setting environment variables in a downstream environment, creating group teams, sharing Canvas apps, all of those kind of like Power Platform-ish types of things that you just, don't come along with the solution, and that you need to create a deployment settings config file that the Azure DevOps build tasks use to hook
the
all
kind
that
of
stuff
things that you might be doing manually, right? So that seems to be what it's doing there for you. I mean, you mentioned Healthy ALM earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on, if anyone of our listeners, which I think has gone up to 6 now, so
Come on, Scott. What is this running joke here? Eventually we'll get to 10 by the end of the year.
Christine, right? Christine said she was a listener, right? So
She just joined.
Just keeping a tally. But yeah, so if anyone's wondering, what is Healthy ALM, and if they were comparing it with what they're doing today, they may not be using the ALM toolkit accelerator. They may not be using Azure DevOps. What would be your take on what people should be aiming for to be healthy?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the first and foremost thing is that you're using solutions, right? Like ALM in the Power Platform is solution driven and will be for the foreseeable future. So if you're building flows and Canvas apps outside of solutions, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you're getting them into solutions. The ALM Accelerator will not work with anything outside of a solution. In addition to that, static analysis of your solutions and things like that. Like we have the solution checker built into our pipeline, so you're doing some sort of static analysis. We have a pipeline that effectively, when you commit a solution and create a pull request for it, it will go out, build that solution from the source code and deploy it into an environment, and effectively say, this is good to go prior to it ever getting into an actual downstream environment. So, being solution centric with your work in the Power Platform, doing some of those best practices like static analysis, just to, give yourself a bit of a warm and fuzzy about, yes, this thing is kind of meets at least the minimum bar. Yes, it can be packaged and deployed. But also being able to see the source and the changes that people are making, knowing who made the changes and when they made them, and being able to track, track those things against like tickets and things like that inside of Azure DevOps, or if you're using GitHub or whatever it may be, being able to see that complete history of what's happened. Because a lot of people, even if you are in the solution world and all of your components are in a solution, a lot of people are just exporting the zip file and importing downstream. That's fine. But when you start to get into more sort of collaborative development and things like that, you want to see who's making changes and, and what those changes are. So I think those are the key sort of components to Healthy ALM. And I probably missed some along the way, but being able to deploy into a downstream environment with, push of a button, as opposed to, that sort of more error prone potentially, process of giving somebody access in a downstream environment or a production environment so that they can import that solution, is not the most healthy practice, because it's error prone, but it's also giving people access that they shouldn't need. All of our pipelines run as service principals, so you have a app registration in Azure that you give access for the pipelines to run. Individuals don't necessarily need to have that access in those environments. So,
yeah, I'm on my first project where I've got the ALM working-ish. I mean, I think everyone's at a different state of working-ish. There's always made some things they want to do, but it's been so nice to be like, oh, I'm on vacation. Oh, we need to deploy to QA. Well, so-and-so can do it. They just push the button. It's not, I mean, it's been so freeing not to be the one that's going to have to do that. That's going to have to get up at whatever time to go do that or be involved with that. It's like, all right, well, just push the button.
Yep.
That's it. Push the button and it goes and everyone's happy. until we have a bug.
Well, repeatability, and that's the thing, isn't it? Being able to do something, and it does every time. It's going to be doing the same time, and like you say, Mike, that traceability. I mean, if someone's not using the ALM Accelerator today, but they are doing kind of similar things. I mean, it's all managed, right? Isn't it, Mike? Do you have to use managed solutions for this, or can you use unmanaged solutions?
Yeah. So everything in the downstream environment is managed.
Right. We'll just not dwell on this. We're just gonna. Well,
there's some capability in the ALM Accelerator to. It's kind of when you think about your sort of inner dev loop with, when you're writing code, right? Like you pull from Git, you get the latest source code, you make your changes in a branch, that's your private branch, and then eventually you pull request into, the main branch or whatever it may be. And, at that point, somebody goes and looks at that code and says, this is good. You do a code review. We're following the same sort of ProCode practices in a way, because the ALM Accelerator provides the ability for you to actually pull the latest code from source control. So you can actually pull an unmanaged solution into your development environment from source code. And, that enables some of the collaborative type development where, somebody else committed, Daryl went on vacation. He committed all of his code and everything's broken now. And I need to pull that down but I need to pull that into my environment. And, so yeah, we're following those sort of standard practices as well. And there's also the ability to delete. So when you screw up everything in your unmanaged solution and you want to get rid of that unmanaged solution, start from scratch, you have the ability to do that as well. So it's kind of, it kind of provides that full inner loop and the outer loop as well for deploying into downstream environments as managed.
So is that delete where you would reset the environment and then you would rebuild it from that particular branch?
Yeah, it's not necessarily resetting the environment. It's actually just deleting the unmanaged solution. So there's a workaround. If you delete an unmanaged solution, technically all you're doing is deleting that container. You're not deleting any of the components or any of the work that you did there. So the delete actually is a pipeline that runs. It will export the unmanaged solution as managed and import it over top of the unmanaged solution, and then subsequently delete it. Now, that gets tricky because if there's dependencies, you could end up in a bad state, but it does provide some ability to kind of reset the changes you've made in a solution without necessarily resetting the entire environment. So
cool. That sounds awesome.
So yeah. So I mean, let me start over again. I never get into a situation, or I get into situations sometimes where someone has been doing unmanaged to prod the whole time, and then I'm like, all right, if we want to do managed, like what does that mean for what's out there in prod? Does that and so I've never been brave enough to like try to do the migration or try to make sure that everything works. So you're saying that just taking your unmanaged stuff and making and exporting it out as managed and bringing it back in as managed and deleting it actually would technically work as long as you don't have a dependency of, hey, you're deleting this unmanaged thing or this that's not managed. You're deleting this component that has a dependency on this one. I can't delete the entity if you've got some other solution that has that column or something that's using that or reference to it or something. So, okay. Yeah. All right. I assumed it would be a whole lot worse than what that was, but that sounds like it's not as bad. And it's to say, hey, you've been doing unmanaged your whole time. Hey, just do it managed. And now that managed layer is going to basically lock down your unmanaged layer. Is that kind of how that works?
Yeah.
All right. I feel dirty saying it. I don't know.
There is a convert to manage sort of gesture on import that will allow you to convert an unmanaged into managed. Can't go back once you're there, but
I can imagine what kind of some people might see that gesture as being, but probably.
Yeah. It's
so yeah, that sounds awesome. So the as you were saying, a lot of this work you're doing is very much in alignment with where the platform is going. So I think to me that seems the real special part of this accelerator is that it's not just giving you an accelerator and giving you some kind of best practices. It's also giving us a bit of an insider view on actually how the platform is moving. And so, if people are doing something, doing ALM without the accelerator, they might be doing the same kind of things, but by using the accelerator, or by keeping an eye on the accelerator, you can always see, okay, well, we're on the right track, or actually there's going to be an upgrade path at the future. I mean, do you think is that what's planned? Or if you're using the accelerator, there's like a promise that you'll be able to easily migrate into the way in which the platform will evolve?
I thought Michael was going to do it for you.
Yeah, no,
he's going to come to everyone's environment. Yeah, I'll sort it out for you.
You just open an issue on GitHub.
Yeah. Yes. Well, if anyone's seen Mike's GitHub resolution history, it's pretty superhuman. So I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, we take a lot of pride. The whole COE starter kit. So the ALM Accelerator is part of the COE starter kit now. We release on the same schedule as them, monthly releases. We use the ALM Accelerator to do our releases of the COE starter kit, including the ALM Accelerator itself. So we definitely eat our own dog food there, and we've got release pipelines that kind of close out all the issues in a milestone and things like that. So yeah, but to your point, Scott, our plan is absolutely to move in the direction that the platform's moving, to deprecate things when the platform supports it, and to basically have an on-ramp for people to get to in-platform ALM at some point when it becomes available. And that's the point at which I'm out of the job. So
you're out of that job.
I'm out of that job.
Yeah, I'm sure you're always going to have indispensable. But so, eventually it might just become a shim, like an app shim around all of the platform features that, are built in. And then maybe eventually,
I was going to say, I can see a day where, they may end up taking our pipelines, for the platform itself. Like, we spent a lot of time on getting the pipelines working, and we're going to continue to, like I said, we've got some hacky PowerShell. I don't want to say hacky. We've got some really innovative PowerShell in there, where, hopefully, that those things will be exposed as build tasks. We can get rid of that PowerShell, and at some point we've got a nice clean pipeline that just, executes build tasks. And, so I could see us potentially, getting to a point where maybe they take some inspiration from our pipelines for theirs.
A nice example of that was when you had your PowerShell tasks for activating flows after import. And then now that's part of the Power Platform build tools.
Right.
So, so that kind of was almost like an example of what you're describing, kind of, if that keeps on happening, those build tasks are gradually going to just kind of be absorbed by all of the build tools.
Right. Yep. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
And we do, so like the PowerCat team sits in the, in the product team org, in the engineering org, and, primarily PowerCat, works with customers to kind of draw feedback and bring it back to the platform team. But yes, we have that influence on the product, as well as, and that insight into what it is that they're doing. So it's kind of it's a good symbiotic relationship there with what we're doing. And the COE starter kit tools that the PowerCat team builds obviously are influencing the product as well. So it's exciting. It's an exciting position and place to be in within Microsoft.
Very nice. So the environment story, because obviously the technology aside, I think there's a lot of templates there. So even if you're not actually using the actual, the accelerator in its entirety, there's a lot of great, you mentioned, hacky PowerShell, but actually the PowerShell's pretty awesome. What it does. And so there's a lot of stuff that people can draw on there, but also there's a lot of, like you were alluding to earlier there, Mike, about the best practices and about how people can work together and collaborate as teams, and in terms of, pull requests and branches and things like that. And if anyone sort of starts to use the ALM accelerator, then there is this sort of notion of lots and lots of different solutions, and you've got promoting between different environments and things like that. One of the things, a lot of questions I get asked by people is how do we work in parallel between different developers? You've got two different people working on two different things. One person's making an app, one person's working on some plugins, and one person's working on some metadata configuration, and they're all, do we work in a different environment for each of those people? Do we work on the same environment? Do we work in separate solutions? What's the ALM Accelerator's take on that in terms of the best practices that people might be following?
Yeah, we are somewhat unopinionated, I think. The idea and the goal behind it is to be able to work in dev isolation. In practice, it's not great. The platform doesn't, provide us with that capability. As far as, noisy diffs and things like that tend to be a huge problem for us. We do a lot of our Canvas app development and solution development, sort of in a shared development environment. Obviously, there's people who they do developer isolation and they'll sort of merge into a single sort of development environment, all of their stuff, and then kind of tweak it from there. It's really hard to do developer isolation right now with the Power Platform the way it is. However, things like the Canvas Unpack that's in still experimental that we're using provides some tools to be able to smartly resolve merge conflicts. They separate out a lot of the sort of date timestamp type stuff that's always going to update on every export. They've got checksums and things like that they kind of separate out, that whoever's last in wins sort of situation, but the app code itself is isolated, so you can do more sort of merging at the file level with that stuff. It's just that the rest of the solution XML and JSON stuff that gets expanded when you unpack a solution is a lot noisier than it should be. And to be honest, the tools like Git diff tools aren't very good with XML. I mean, they're from my experience, it's not an easy thing to do to kind of merge those files at the file level. I do know that some of that experimental work that was going on with the Canvas Unpack is coming back to the solution framework as a whole. That was sort of their first delve into it. So at some point, we'll have better experiences with sort of file level merging and things like that. But right now, it's not ideal, to be candid.
You're not where you want to be. That's okay. We're all there at times, right? You're just dealing with whatever the previous guy did, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like you're saying, it's trying to be unopinionated, and in a sense, that means that you can then you can sort of meet people wherever they are in terms of however they want to work to a certain degree. I mean, is there any opinions that it does hold other than just simply exporting into Git and then repacking and then importing? Is there anything that you would say to people? You have to this is your minimum entry level before you start using the ALM Accelerator, other than using solutions like you were saying before?
I think we actually have two different interfaces not two. We have a configurable interface in the app itself. So a while back, we had two accelerators. We had one that we called like the for makers, and we had one that we called the advanced for makers, advanced makers. And we kind of combined those two user experiences and provided some ability to say, if you're a maker and you don't understand what a branch is and you don't really care what a branch is, all you know is that you want to commit your solution, save your solution somewhere, and then ultimately deploy it. We have introduced sort of a maker experience on top of the app. If you're using the advanced maker experience, then you're going to, the expectation is that you do understand where you're branching from. You understand like committing, and you understand that you may need to resolve conflicts But the idea is that the maker experience would be kind of transparent to that. Somebody would ultimately have to go in there and look at what you did, and potentially resolve merge conflicts, or
what did you do?
Yeah.
What did you do?
So there is the expectation that, and the setup also expects that you understand some of those concepts. So it may not be the end user that it needs to understand those concepts, but the person setting it up absolutely does. The person who's maintaining it absolutely does. They need to have familiarity with Azure DevOps, with some Azure AD related things as well. And yeah, so there's a barrier to entry there if you don't have some of those expertise, I think. But we are trying. I mean, we're trying to build something here that is, not just for enterprises, but is for small dev shops, mom and pop shops, for them to be able to do ALM. It's a difficult challenge. It's not necessarily easy to do that, but there is we have a lot of documentation available, kind of step by step how to set things up. We also have a CLI now for setup, because the setup is very it's like 60 pages of documents, so it can be daunting. But we have a CLI, wow. And we have some aspirations to put more of an easy button layer on top of that CLI as well for the setup and the maintenance of the pipelines and the app.
So, I mean, you've been like 2 years-ish, you've been working on this stuff. Like last 2 months, what have you been focused on? What has the team been focused on? What are they trying to tackle? What's the big ask?
So the separation of the pipelines and the app was a big one. We've also been focusing on extensibility, so the ability for people to kind of inject their own pipeline YAML into our pipeline, so we can have a sort of static. Here's how we do it, and to be honest, we're serving ourselves as well as serving other people. So here's how we do our pipelines. If you want to inject something, static analysis, if you want to kind of massage the deployment configuration at some point in your process, being able to do that, helps because we get a lot of requests for things, and we actually get a lot of pull requests into our pipelines, and some of those things are things we don't necessarily want to do, right? Like they're not bad, but they don't make sense for everybody. So we're trying to provide the ability to have a flexible sort of pipeline in place that people can kind of inject their own things into, rather than us having this monolithic, pipeline that does everything that every company is ever going to want to do, which doesn't make sense, right? Like, so
is that different than like making a decision and saying, hey, do you want to do this or this? We'll handle that. Is that different than that, or is that kind of like the same sort of thing?
It's different, I think, because there are places where we have variables in our pipeline that say, I don't want to unpack my Canvas apps. You can absolutely do that, right? You can set a variable on the pipeline that says don't unpack. Things like that we have built in. These are more sort of what you guys would, plugins. They are things, certain places within our pipeline where you can inject your own sort of logic. And they are like plugins, right? Like they're pre and post steps, essentially. So we've been working towards that to kind of, because there's like we don't do anything with environment management, Scott, right? Like you had brought up environments. We don't do anything with just-in-time environments and things like that. There's people out there that want to do that. If they do, good for them. That's very brave of you, but I think it's one of those things that we would never necessarily put into our pipelines, but we want to provide ability for people to do that if they want to.
That seems like a big deal, because I mean I'm in the Power Platform Level Up Discord group, and for like the last day and a half, people have been talking about all the different ways they do plugins. You need to have one plugin and does everything, one plugin that does nothing. You want a plugin that does this. You want to have light code here. And there's every single person may have a completely different way of doing it, and you can't really go, well, that's wrong or that's right. You're just like, oh, well, that thing that works for you, or that works in this situation, and this is how you apply that. So having the ability to be able to inject your own sort of stuff, man, that seems like that's a really big advantage people can have, as well as, all of a sudden people may throw something out like, oh, well, that's really nice. Maybe we should just make that part of the main thing, So, yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. And when we started introducing this idea, we were also thinking like, yeah, instead of a pull request into our main repo, create a YAML template that does what you're looking to do, and then other people benefit from it as well. So it could become a sort of one-stop shop for these sort of things that people want to be able to do, and they can just go pull it into their pipeline and and use it. And that really is what it's a reference implementation, right? Like, it's what we're building is something that we have some opinions about how you should be doing it. We have built in some opinions, and sometimes we have to take a stand and say, okay, well, this is how we're doing it. If you want to do it a different way, that's fine. It's a reference implementation. You can take the pipelines, you can do whatever you want with them, but we won't necessarily guarantee an upgrade path if you take it off on your own and start customizing it. And that's the way the COE starter kit works too. You can customize the COE starter kit, but again, we're not going to support those customizations. We'll help you with them on GitHub, but that's the sort of idea there.
Very, very cool. So we talked about the Canvas unpacking and metadata, being able to see the diffs and that kind of stuff. And when we were talking earlier about, you said going in and just seeing, checking what someone's done. I don't know if you've seen Stranger Things 4, but the beginning when Puffer's saying, "What have you done to L?" I can't get out of my head now. But what about like more the kind of the ProCode side of things? So if you've got, I don't know, C# plugins, we're talking about plugins, right? So, but a different type of plugin, C# plugins, and for Dataverse or PCF components or JavaScript web resources that need to be built from TypeScript. Previously that was the sort of thing that you'd have had to kind of build your own extensions for. Where's that going in terms of your, the current plans?
Yeah, we've been for the past 2 years primarily focused on low code. That's just recently we brought on another dev I've been working with, who is working on the ProCode story. So plugins and PCF we'll have full support for those, at least our sort of MVP of full support by the next release, which is the September release. So we're actually, I said we release on a monthly basis. We usually release on the first week of the month along with the COE starter kit. This month in particular, we have sort of an early release planned for the August release, so it's actually going out next week. But yeah, the following release will include plugins and PCF support. We haven't really done anything with the web resources at this point, as far as building web resources from TypeScript and bringing those in. It's one of those, I guess, priorities that we just have kind of punted on a little bit. But yeah, I can see us addressing that at some point, in the near future. Now that we have another dev on board that can kind of support that stuff. We're a very small team. When I say very small, it's me and Rajiv. But I mean, we have a lot of other people who contribute, but it is not their full-time job. Like, we have a lot of internal people at PowerCat that contribute a lot to the docs, that help us with testing, that also contribute PRs into our repo. It's just that the focus, a lot of the focus of the people on our team are customer facing, and then when they have bandwidth to help us out, they do. It's just that we have to prioritize, right? And like, our backlog is public along with all of our source code, so you can go out at any point in time onto our GitHub repo. You can look at the project we have out there, and you can see what we're planning for the next 3 releases. Those are subject to change, but we do prioritize things, and we prioritize bugs first, right? And we've spent a lot of time stabilizing over the past year. We're at a really good point right now where I think there's going to be a lot more feature focus, because we are at a very stable point with the app and with the pipeline. So that's good. that's our process.
So you said fully supported plugins and NPCF. What does that mean? Does that mean that you say, hey, here's my location and code where I have my plugin project, and here's my location and code where I have my PCF code base? Like what does that mean, fully supported? Because it sounds great, but I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that we are going to provide sort of a prescribed way of doing it, and we're going to do it like we want to do it within the COE starter kit, because we have apps that leverage both, obviously. So we're kind of internally deciding, like, this is how we want to do things. We're going to try not to be opinionated. Like, we are going to come out with, like, what mocking framework we're using, and if you want to use a different mocking framework, that's fine. If you want to use, a different, if you want to use late bound versus early bound, you can. Obviously, we're not, we're going to make a decision one way or another there. But, and you'll be happy to know that Mark is a fan of early bound. So there you go.
Well, at least I got one guy on the team there.
Yeah. But yeah, and that's sort of like, we're going to come out with there's a prescribed way of doing things. Here's how you can do ProCode or code first development in the platform. I know there's going to be a lot of people who do things differently than we end up making a decision on, but that's all good. Any opinions and people's entering issues and contributions back is what what makes us better and has made us better. So yeah, that's our. We'll put something out there, and anybody is feel free to beat it up. You can call our baby ugly. That's fine.
But by the sounds of it, the stuff you were talking about with the plugins, being able to have your own YAML built in and stuff. I mean, that when you start to combine that with having that broader coverage of the different types of solution element and build elements, that really does start to kind of complete the entire picture, because then you can just plug in whatever other stuff you want to do inside your pipelines that you may be currently doing. So that does sound quite cool, to be able to support migrating from people where they are at the moment to, using the accelerator, and then ultimately to using whatever the platform is, going to be providing out of the box. What I really do love about these initiatives, so the COE, the COE initiatives, the ALM Accelerator, that the whole middle ground between what's available in the platform and what people are doing based on purely on the docs. Because previously it would be like, okay, well, you've got the platform that does X. You learn about how it works on the docs. Then you decide on, okay, well, how are we going to do this stuff? How are we going to fit it all together? And then, you'd sort of formulate your own opinions. But what this is really good is that it not only is it's providing guidance, okay, well, you should be doing healthy ALM. It's actually providing prescriptive guidance. It's actually providing, here's the code, it's open source, like you say, Mike. You can go and see it, and you can see this is the way that we do it internally within Microsoft, and that's really special. I think that's something that. There's something that we didn't really have up until the beginning of the COE initiative.
Yeah, and it's exciting. I mean, doing an open source power platform project like of this scale, I don't know if it's ever been done before. And it was exciting to get to a point where we can actually, we're not quite at the point where we can take contributions because of some of that, some of that stuff that we talked about earlier with code development, and but we have, as with the pipelines, especially, we've had external people PR into that. Obviously, that's more of a code first type thing, but we've had people, make contributions in other ways, right? Like opening issues, opening features, having discussions around ways that we should be doing things, and that leads to us, changing and adjusting and getting better. And it would be great to be at a point. We would love to be at a point where we can take PRs directly into our Canvas apps and our solutions. We're not quite there yet. We have had a couple of people go in there and hand jam some YAML into our Canvas app, which we'll accept those, but it's as like small stuff that you can contribute.
Hand
back,
jam.
but
Hand jam? Is that a
hand jam? Yeah.
I'm not.
Is that another word for hack? Is that an East Coast thing? I don't know about.
Yeah, it must be an East Coast thing. Yeah. It must be an expert crabber kind of thing.
Sticky hands in my mind.
I know. It's like, get your hand jams out of my code.
Yeah, it's like modifying the code directly as opposed to modifying it in the studio and then exporting it and do things like that. So
yeah, that's lovely that that there's this aspiration to get to this open source time when you can accept PRs, because as you say, that does demonstrate, because you're using the toolkit yourself, the accelerator yourself, that means that once you're at that point, it means that the accelerator is fulfilling on what it needs to do. It's allowing multiple teams to work together, be able to see changes, be able to merge things in, and move forwards and iterate as Fusion teams need to be able to do. So yeah, it's almost like at this sweet spot between the convergence of everything that's going on, which is awesome.
So I may be throwing a wrench in here, but I'm more interested than anything else.
Here it goes. This is where the part where Daryl asks for stuff.
No, I'm asking how things would work. Okay, come on, Scott. So a couple weeks ago, there was a bug in the Azure DevOps plugin that we use to install or to import our solutions.
Yes.
In Microsoft, they added a feature to a new feature flag to be able to enable or disable your plugins. Mm-hmm. And they had it set up wrongly, or the opposite of what I would assume it would, or what it was doing before, which it was we had a different flag. So they basically changed the flag, and now all of a sudden, when I deployed, all of my plugin steps got disabled. Mm-hmm. And that was because I was always using the latest version. I wasn't sticking to a particular version of the deployment tool. Does the ALM process, does it stick to the latest version, or does it stick to a particular version? Or and if it sticks to the latest version and all of a sudden we have this major issue, like, is it just, hey, you go in and hack it for a little bit and you wait for it to clear and then you go back to the tool? How do you handle the, oh no, this is a crazy thing that happens once every 3 years sort of thing?
Yeah. That was so just some background as to what's going on. They've released and they pulled it back. But they basically re-architected the entire Power Platform build tools. It used to be very PowerShell heavy. They basically moved everything out of the PowerShell into PAC CLI. So PAC CLI is what executes behind the scenes in all the build tools now. And the reason they did that was because they wanted to get to a cross-platform state where they could, you could run the build tools in Linux or Windows or GitHub.
That makes sense.
Same thing. GitHub.
PowerShell you can't run PowerShell on Linux?
You can if you're using PowerShell Core, but I think they had a whole bunch of legacy. Well, I know they had a whole bunch of legacy Windows PowerShell in there. Right. But yeah, when they built the actions for GitHub, they built all of that stuff on top of PAC CLI, and they wanted to get to a point basically where there's parity between the two. So that's what happened there. That was a huge effort, and they did unfortunately break a lot of people when they released it. They pulled it back, and I think
it was a short break. I remember I actually commented and hit Matt Barber up on the Discord channel, and he's like, "Let me get back to you." And like when he says "Let me get back to you," that usually means there's someone he's going to talk to, and they're going to have a good conversation there and get something fixed. But yeah, so they did fix it fairly quickly, but it was a fairly major issue. So yeah.
There were a few issues that we ran up against as well. We do stick to the latest version though, so yeah. And they actually released that that wasn't a version change. It was basically, it was like it was a bump in the build number, I think, but it wasn't a minor version change because they wanted to provide backward compatibility with everything right off from the start. So, but yeah.
First time I've had an issue like that in the last year. So great. But that was exciting. And it's like, why is it? And I was just very glad that I hadn't deployed to prod. It was a lower environment that I caught it in, because that would have been a major issue without that. So
I guess that's a really good point to accentuate, is that the best practice is healthy ALM. You have a QA environment that you can check these things on, that simulates the actual real and
you're running it a lot too, right?
Yeah, you're running it constantly, and you trap those things a lot earlier than you might have done if it was you would have to be pretty unlucky if that you happened to deploy to prod and you hadn't in the time frame between deploying it to your upstream environments and prod, and that change had happened. That would be a lot more unlikely, I think.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I expect all your code to be perfect, and all of your scripts to be perfect, and all your YAML to be perfect. If it isn't, I'll have to pay you all, take back all the money I paid you, which is nothing.
It's going to have very stern words with you.
One of our focuses recently as well has been automated testing of our pipelines, especially. So we've had a big push there. So that's good. And I think so it should be perfect for you when you're ready to use it, Daryl.
We heard it first here. Mike said it should be perfect.
It should be perfect for you.
It should be.
He said when you're ready to use, he didn't even put in the fullness of times. When you're ready to use it. I'm ready. Let's see, it's 11:56 my time, so about 5 minutes we're good to go. It'd be perfect. Right?
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that phrase more often, though. It should be perfect.
It should be perfect. It should be perfect. Yes, it should be. Maybe add enough at the end. It should be perfect enough. Yeah. So, Mike, I appreciate your time. Appreciate all the work you've been doing in the tool, and not everyone has you to reach out to that you answer. I'm assuming you'd answer everyone's, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth. But you answer me when I send out questions to you, as long as you find my email in your slew of emails, apparently. So I thank you for that. But for those of our listeners that maybe don't have that relationship with you, don't feel as comfortable about that, how do they get started using this? How do they get started like diving into it and being a part of it?
So our docs for setup and for our user documentation is all in Microsoft Docs. You can look up ALM Accelerator for Power Platform, and it should get you started there. You can go to our GitHub if you want to reach out, if you have a problem, if you have a question, if you have a feature, whatever it may be. Go to our GitHub repo. It's github.com/COE-starter-kit. And
that was memorized for those of you that are just listening. Good job. Good job.
And we take a lot of pride, like the whole team does, COE Starter Kit team, as well as the ALM Accelerator by extension. If you put an issue on there, you're going to get a response, and it's not just going to be hey, we'll get back to you in a couple of weeks type of response. Like, we try our best to answer questions quickly and to follow up on them. So that's the best way to reach out.
That was a huge thing with that bug we were talking about with the CLI. I went to go put an issue in. Someone had already put an issue in on that, and I added my additional details, and I think I had a response within 30 minutes with like, oh yeah, this is what it is. We figured it out, and it gave me enough information that I knew. I know how to fix this, even with the version that they have, because it was just setting a flag, and I know what the flag is now, and so I could go through and I was able to fix it myself within before lunchtime, which is great.
Yeah,
right?
It's the big benefit of being out there in the open like that. Really is.
It's like this. What would it be like if we were back in the days when like MSDN was like shipped on a CD, so all your documentation came like once a year? Like, can you imagine us being back in that situation? Like that would be
wow.
People lived like that for so long, and
people lived like that. Yeah.
Yes, I know. I mean, that's and all those. Yeah, it goes back to all those.
April Fools. Did you see that where they were selling YouTube on DVD?
Yes. You get a new box every single month, but the problem is they get more and more videos, so the box gets bigger every month or something. So it was great. It was great. Well, Mike, appreciate the time you spent with us. And appreciate the tools and all your work. Is there anything else you want to share, or any way that you want to call out for people to get a hold of you besides what you've already mentioned?
Twitter, Mike Factorial on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, hit me up there.
All right. Mike Ochs, Mike Factorial. Scotty, you haven't even listened to Scotty. Do you go by Scotty around the house, around your friends, around people?
You can call me what you like, really.
Just whenever I think of Scotty, I think of Star Trek, the original cast.
Like
Beam me up. Yeah, beam me up, Scotty. Yeah.
Don't have the power. Yes.
That's what everyone says, so I just go with it.
Don't we? There's a meme in there somewhere with the old Scotty, don't have the power platform. Like, yeah, that's someone's going to create that now that they've listened to this. So, well, Scott, that's how our listeners get a hold of our guests. How can they get a hold of us?
Well, yes, we would love to hear from you. You can get us on email at cast@xrmtoolbox.com, or you can reach out to us on social media at xrmtoolcast. And please do get in touch. And Mike, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
You too, guys. Thank you.
It's really, really exciting stuff, and look forward to seeing how it moves forward in the future.
Thanks, guys.
Talk to you later, guys. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been the XRM Toolcast with Daryl Labar and Scott Darrell. Produced by Lynn Zawin. If you have any questions or suggestions, please send them to cast@xrmtoolbox.com, tweet @XRM Toolcast, or hit us up on our LinkedIn XRM Toolcast page.